Recording in progress.
Greetings and welcome. What have you just seen? Well, it's not a very engaging prospect, is it? No, this is a conundrum, a dichotomy, a Hobson's choice, call it what you will, that country after country seems to need to face. And this has had all kinds of responses. On the one end, there is the viewpoint expressed that, well, we'll have to just leave the health considerations aside because a country cannot endure lockdowns. We need to get back to business and we need to restore livelihoods. Life just has to go on. Then on the other end of the scale is the view that there's a great deal that needs to be endured, maybe even low growth or slow growth for 6 months, maybe a year. It said 2022 in that clip that you just saw. And we just have to endure it. And there is a great need for responses, adequate responses to save lives. For if we do not have the lockdown, then the chances are that 10,000 people will die or face infections. So that's a risk that's not worth taking. So those are the different viewpoints. Now, the feelings that have been generated on account of this have been quite severe. Massive protests in country after country. We have seen some of that on our news clips. And over here too, there is that anxiety. Now, these protests against lockdowns and curfews obviously have been not very, very good because it only leaves the general public quite confused. There's also the need for caution. There has been a request often made for accelerated vaccinations, and certain countries have been able to do that. Some countries have obviously lagged behind for various reasons. There's also been an urgent need, they say, that emergency responses have to just crank up and more hospital beds need to be made available, more oxygen supplied, and so on and so forth. But what happens to the people? They are quite confused as to what all this means. Now, in the middle of all of this, there is a concept. The concept is called smart lockdown, which is not to be confused with a partial lockdown or even curfews enforced in certain parts of the day or the night. No, smart lockdown entails a great deal more, lots more. In fact, it's not that easy because it needs responses from different areas, from different disciplines, unlike in a partial lockdown or a curfew. There has to be coordinated responses and comprehensive tracing, data management. There has to be science brought in, not emotion, but science brought in. Then there has to be coordinated action involving different disciplines, whether it'll be medical, that's public health, commercial, logistics, manufacturers, hotels, restaurants, and the hospitality trade in general, medical supplies and suppliers. What about finance? Well, there's that aspect too. Law enforcement comes in, food supplies, adequate food supplies where it is needed, and then above all, communicating accurate information and communication of policy. All of this becomes very, very important because we need to garner complete public support. Otherwise, it's not a smart lockdown at all. So public support is vital. This has been experimented with, interestingly, in Asia, and Pakistan is one of those countries that have done it. So this idea, this concept of smart lockdown was proposed about a year ago. In fact, Dinesh Virakoti, the chairman of ICC Sri Lanka, did mention that at its early stages. Of course, not much happened with regard to the implementation, but the concept is not brand new. So this webinar will bring several minds into assessing a practical way forward. What is it that is possible with a smart lockdown? Is it possible? And can smart lockdowns really happen in this country, in the reality of our country? Can we have this multidisciplinary response that will be able to advise policymakers and for policymakers to be able to take it on? So we have macroeconomics, the national economy, business matters, medical and health matters, decision makers, bankers and planners who will form our panel today. That is all I need to say right now, but we would like to proceed with inviting the first of our speakers. Joining us from Hong Kong, certainly a well-known name by now in Sri Lanka, Professor Malik Pierce, who's been vitally involved for, I think, more than a decade now with respiratory disease. And SARS first appeared in 2008, 2009, and other coronavirus afflictions came along. He has been in the thick of it. And of course, with identifying this new one, the novel coronavirus referred to by the code name COVID-19, he's been right there. So he's a virologist and vitally involved in Hong Kong in the public health system there. And we invite everyone's attention as Professor Malik Pierce broaches the topic of the state of affairs as they exist now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let me try to share my screen very quickly. Hope it all goes smoothly. And I hope you can see that now. So so my mandate is to talk about smart lockdowns. I must start by saying that I don't like the word lockdown, and the reason is because it is a series of interventions. It is not an yes or no situation. And I hope I can make that clear. So what we have to contain COVID-19 are a series of physical distancing, social distancing measures, in addition to personal protection measures, such as wearing masks and hand hygiene. Now, what you see here, because some people do say that these whatever lockdowns or interventions don't work, what you see here is the stringency of interventions in Sri Lanka and the chart of cases. So this stringency index is developed by the University of Oxford. You can see the parameters that go into it. It is communication, as was pointed out by the chairman, restrictions of gathering sites, public gatherings, school closures, workplace closures, public transport, restrictions of internal movement, and stay-at-home requirement is just one of them. So if you go back to, for example, the Minuangadu cluster last year, you can see the case numbers going up. And in response to that, Sri Lanka increased its stringency level from fairly low to quite high in the 80s. And together with that, you can see the outbreak coming down. Now then, of course, the stringency was reduced as the cases were coming down. And unfortunately, at this time, the Alpha variant got introduced into the country. So the two things together, the new variant as well as the reduced stringency, led to a major outbreak. That was the April, May, June outbreak. And stringency was moved up, the case numbers come down. And then, of course, stringency comes down again. And again, for our bad fortune, we had Delta virus introduced here. And you can see now in the case numbers shooting up. And that is a challenge that we face. So clearly these measures do work. And I also want to emphasize, as I said, this is not just an all or nothing situation. It's a range of interventions. Now, you might ask which of these interventions are more important. Now, there have been a number of studies, global studies, involving one involving 226 countries, another 131 countries, looking at the impact of these individual interventions. So clearly, what they find is that large gathering cancellations, small gathering limitations, school closures, masks, restrictions of persons' movement, workplace closures, stay-at-home orders, all of these are the interventions that are being shown to be useful and to work. Now, obviously, which ones you choose and what order, it depends on a whole range of factors. Now, I now want to get on to the timing. So it's not just the which intervention or interventions we should put into place, it's also a matter of timing. And I will now go to example from Hong Kong. So this is the latter part of last year and early part of this year. We had one of our waves of introductions and human cases, which you see down here. But what we do in Hong Kong is we monitor a parameter called the reproduction number of the epidemic. Essentially, what it means is the number of new cases caused by individual case. So it gives you the force of infection, if you like. So you can see that at this time, around the middle of October, the reproduction number was very low. So by the way, 1 is the critical threshold, because below 1, it means the epidemic is contracting, getting smaller and smaller. When it goes above 1, it means the epidemic is expanding. So you can see it was quite low, but by 20th or so of October, this indicator has started to rise. Now, if you just look at it compared to the case numbers hardly, is still a very small blip. So it is at that point that interventions were brought in. And you can see that the reproduction number continues to go up because these interventions don't work overnight and then starts to come down. So the important thing is, by intervening early, you can limit the scale of the outbreak. So these epidemics are like supertankers. So when they are steaming full speed ahead in the ocean, to turn it around or to stop it, you can't do it within 100 yards or whatever. It takes kilometers or miles to make a change of direction. So that is, I think, a very important part of the smart lockdown, because if you use these interventions early, guided by these parameters, you probably do not need to go the whole hog to full-scale lockdowns. And also, you limit the impact on the healthcare sector. Otherwise, of course, you're faced with continuing increase in the numbers of cases. Now, how does a lockdown work? Now, if you just imagine one particular person who is infected, he or she meets various people, and in this case, infects 3 people, and so on and so on. Now, if, for example, this is in the context of a lockdown, and this person got infected, let's say just somewhat before the lockdown, after a period of time, because there's an incubation period for this disease, from the time of infection, that person then becomes infectious, may or may not have symptoms, may or may not have severe disease, very likely not. And that person is now infectious. Now, if the person is out in the community, he or she will be transmitting to many people who that person meets. But if you're confined within your house, for example, you might infect other family members in the house. But then it doesn't spread beyond that. And hopefully, most of these cases are mild, and it stops there. So the oxygen that this virus needs to spread is human contact. So that is the principle. Now, the other important thing is that you cannot expect that when you introduce one of these lockdown measures, that it will work immediately because of these factors I told you. There's a time lag between infection and becoming infectious or developing symptoms. And then once a person develops symptoms, that person is infectious for a long period of time. And of course, there will be other people in the house who get infected, and the same thing applies. So that's why lockdowns take about 3 weeks to have an effect. Now, there's another aspect to consider. Can we make COVID-19 a less fearsome disease? And this is data from the epidemiology unit of Sri Lanka. And what you can see is the ages and the mortality. So mortality, and it reflects ICU admissions, severe oxygen dependence and things like that. So you can see that more than 3/4 of the deaths are occurring over 60 years of age. 83% are occurring over 50 years of age. So also, of those who died, only 3% were fully vaccinated. So what it means is that most of the people who are getting severely sick and dying are either unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. So the vaccines are still effective against severe disease, though with Delta variant, they may not be completely protective from infection and transmission. So really what we need to target is prevention of severe disease, death, hospitalization, and overcrowding the hospital sector. So if you can just imagine that if this part of this curve is wiped out, I mean, of course, not completely, but is mitigated quite dramatically, essentially, COVID becomes a much milder disease. And although it may spread in these populations, by and large, it's very mild. And mind you, when the virus infects, it also immunizes. So natural infection is a way of developing immunity as well. Right. So before I end, I mean, these modeling that I told you about, the R number, the reproduction number, etc., can be used to look at the impact of certain interventions on outcomes that you wish. We have people talking about the tourism industry, and this is some modeling done by the WHO Sri Lanka, the WHO Sierra group in Delhi, with the University of Monash. So to cut a long story short, as you know, there are different countries have red, amber, green lists depending on countries, and we are using the UK as an example. And the bottom line is that given the current situation, what they estimated, this is not my work, that a 4-week lockdown will bring Sri Lanka to green status by January. A 6-week lockdown will bring it to green status by December. Now, of course, there are trade-offs with many other things. So just to close, I think what we have to do is to preserve health system capacity, because once we go over the tipping point, then we have the system spiraling out of control. And essentially, not just COVID patients, all patients are in trouble. And I pointed out using epidemiology-based interventions. And please remember the analogy of the supertanker. And finally, vaccines are effective at preventing against severe disease after 2 doses. And the primary aim at this point should be to save lives, prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and maintaining health system capacity. So at this point, we need to forget about herd immunity and focus on curtailing that severe outcomes that are associated with this. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you too, Professor Malik. We appreciate very much that excellent summary at the end helps us to recognize the salient points. May I just direct a question which is out of curiosity, but of course will be of value to the populace as well. We speak about viruses. Now, we have understood this business of viruses jumping from animals to humans, and that seems to be the cause of anxiety. Now, is it necessary to think that every virus that an animal carries is a pathogen? Is it necessary to think like that?
No, of course not. I mean, you know, there are many viruses in humans, but there are many more animal species than humans. And so the diversity of viruses in the animal kingdom is immense. And, you know, obviously it's a very tiny minority of these that cause problems for humans. So obviously, you know, we should not, how shall I say, be scared of animals per se, or ostracize animals per se, because we are scared of viruses jumping to humans. But it is important to maintain surveillance at that animal-human interface. And indeed, that is my whole career, more or less, from the time I was in Sri Lanka, mind you, back in the 1980s, has been focused on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's good that you were able to find time to join with us from Hong Kong. And now we must, of course, move on. And we have a former senior deputy governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, very well known in our community, Mr. W.A. Wijewardena, and he has been long advocating very serious matters being taken up with regard to the economy of this country. And now we will hear from him what this present situation and the lockdown and the smart lockdown might be able to achieve, and other attendant matters as well. So over to Mr. Vijayawardena, please.
Thank you, Arun, for inviting me. I have a little point to share with you.
I think we're waiting for Mr. Vijayawardena's screen share to happen. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's being attended to, I think. Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Vijayawardena. I think it's being attended to. Obviously, there's a little bit of a kerfuffle with regard to the electronics. So please stay with us, of course. We thought we'll move on to the next of our speakers and return to you once we've sorted out the little issues of connectivity. Sometimes these things do happen, as you know. So may I next invite the third of our speakers, Dr. Gotabaya Ranasinghe, whose specialty is cardiology, and he was in the news just a couple of days ago. And he also issued a sort of warning with regard to the prevalence of blood clots in the case of people who might be having COVID infections. So anyway, that's besides the point. The idea is we need to understand from him what lockdowns might be able to achieve in the reality of Sri Lanka, and other advice that he might be able to offer the policymakers. So here we are, Dr. Gotabaya Ranasinghe, please.
First of all, I must thank Mr. Chairman and Dinesh Virakodi and the organizers of this forum. And first of all, this is where we are now, classified as red today. Even though there are green zones, this was taken a few days back, but this is the situation. We all know that we are in the midst of COVID pandemic. The impact of this pandemic on our economy and our health, and also the livelihood of people is unprecedented. So with that remark, I'm going to start my lecture. So this is the global impact. And so you see the daily cases, of course, from last year, March, going up and had been gradually going up. Now with all these measures, global cases is slowly coming down. Though in Southeast Asia, especially Sri Lanka and India, we are struggling. And also you can see daily cases in Sri Lanka. So unfortunately, we are seeing the opposite. So you can see the rise, the staggering rise of the cases, especially when we had the Delta variant. And so from the late July of then August up to now, it's a sharp rise in cases. So the daily deaths also you can see is especially with the Delta variant from kind of July, mid-July, late July, you see the death rates have been going up and up. So this is in August, you can see the daily COVID cases and deaths during this week, unprecedented. It's all more than every day, 4,000, almost 5,000. You can see the deaths even close to 200. And so this is the impact we are having at the moment with this COVID pandemic. What about the health sector? You can see the hospitalizations, the deaths, the other morbidities, mortalities, and the strain and the stress on medical services, doctors, and the group in health services, immense. And so with that, so the economic impact of COVID-19 on Sri Lanka, I don't think I would speak very much on this, but just going through, you can see, I think we are a low economy, the developing nation with more or less we are having an informal economy. We are not very much diversified. We totally depend on several sectors, not very much. We are depending on the global, the chains of the things and the tourism and mainly the informal industries. So we are deeply affected by this this pandemic, as well as a double jeopardy. When we put impose on total lockdown, we will be very much affected. And also not only that, with this the total lockdown, harsh lockdown, the hard lockdown, and so our transport services all is affected, had been affected very much. And so when it comes to control of this disease, again, I would not talk very much about it because some other speakers, other panelists will discuss, but mainly we all know the Professor Peiris highlighted very well, very eloquently the control measures. So, but basically we are doing all these things, and hand sanitization, mask, and social distancing. I have to tell you that this particular virus loves proximity. So social distancing is a very, very important thing here. And so then we come to lockdown. This is how we see the lockdown. And so we see at the beginning of the pandemic, we had national hard, harsh lockdown. Then there were countries with no lockdown. Now we are thinking in between. We had the repercussions of both. Now we are trying to go in the middle path. So this is smart lockdown. I have like the sea tank, what Professor Peiris highlighted. I also have an analogy. This is the analogy I'm going to highlight. And this is Scylla and Charybdis analogy. This is the great story of Greek mythology. And that's, they say, the story which narrates a tale of Greek sailors navigating their ships between these two monsters, maintaining safe distance from two monsters. One is Scylla, that apparently it was the whirlpool, and so then the Charybdis, actually that was the massive rock, six-faced rock. And so they had to be very careful, because if you get closer to one, and you have deaths or the casualties or disasters. And presently, I believe the Sri Lanka seems to have lost in such a conundrum where it can't get close to one monster, whether we are going to get close to the pandemic or harsh lockdown. So we can't afford that. So therefore, by either trying to save the economy or trying to minimize the health consequences of COVID amidst the pandemic, this is where we are heading now. Actually, this is where the smart lockdown come into play. So therefore, a novel balancing lockdown strategy, the smart lockdown should be the way forward to stabilize the prevailing situation in Sri Lanka. This is, we believe, what I strongly believe. And so when it comes to smart lockdown, I think I would rather like to highlight certain facts. And so it is defined as selectively closing a geographically based hotspots And what are the hotspots? It's an area where disease incidence or transmission and is more than 1.5 per thousand. It's high incidence of cases. And so this is the hotspot. And we are closing it, in a systematic manner during an outbreak of a pandemic. And smart lockdowns offers actually a balanced approach to contain the spread of the COVID virus while helping to maintain the country's economy, as Professor Pires said, the livelihood of people. That's the most important thing. And so there are certain guidelines. I don't think I would go into details very much. This is just briefly, the area should be relatively large area, not a street or little village or block. And the period of lockdown should be based on scientific information. That's Professor Pires highlighted that. And maybe at least 2 weeks, or which may be modified as required. And increased epidemiological interventions such as testing, tracing, quarantine, and isolation of suspected or confirmed cases should be conducted within the hotspots. That's a very important thing. And excellent communication should be maintained with the residents of the lockdown area before and after the implementation of the lockdown. And so the activity should be limited, essential services should be continued.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Yeah, so still I have some more slides.
Oh, you have more. Yes, we shall.
Yeah, this is the proposed smart lockdown strategy. Actually, you can see the different colors given. When it is hard lockdown, it indicates in red, and soft lockdown is amber color, and soft opening is yellow. And so when it's fully open, red. This is a model I have just put you to understand and see. So this is a model I'm going to talk about. And see the Pakistan. So we were talking about Pakistan. They started this program. So see the pockets of COVID. They are mostly in amber and the green. You don't see any red. The zone. They are seemingly successful in this game. And the impact of smart lockdown in other countries like Pakistan, you can see that with the Delta variant, cases have come down, death rates have come down drastically. It's becoming very successful venture. And so this is in Italy, by the way, and they also use this smart lockdown strategy. You can see that even with the emergence of the Delta variant, so the cases have come down drastically. And so finally, I want to highlight that Sri Lanka has been witnessing a massive outbreak of COVID-19 since the emergence of Delta variant. The repercussions of COVID-19 has drastically influenced the health of people and the economy of Sri Lanka. We all are experiencing it now. So basic control measures of paramount importance. That is the basic hygienic measures, hand washing, wearing masks, and social distancing, in addition to this lockdown. And the smart lockdown strategy holds great promise to find the equilibrium between health and the economic impact of COVID-19 in Sri Lanka. This is, again, I want to highlight the analogy of the Sri Lankan carried this. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Dr. Gotabe, and my apologies again for interrupting you earlier on. But how good it was to hear from you, and you have been able to virtually define what a smart lockdown is, what it entails, and the responsibilities that devolve upon people and the community. A question that comes up, because you're a cardiologist, I'd like to direct this question to you. And what is the impact on heart health that this Delta variant or COVID in general has had? What are the evidences? Are a lot of people having issues with heart attacks?
Yes, thank you. Actually, so when you come to heart health and the impact on heart due to COVID, I must tell you, when we had the Alpha variant or Alpha epidemic or Alpha pandemic or the Beta, we didn't see very many patients with heart involvement. But in some series, other countries, we have observed that, and in COVID, you get heart involvement up to about 50%. So some way, may not be very severe cases, but it's mild. But in Sri Lanka, we didn't see it very much. But with the emergence of the Delta variant, now we are seeing more and more heart patients. So they are coming with heart attacks, they are coming with the heart failure. So for last few weeks, I have been handling and seeing some more and more patients with heart attack. That is purely because we believe now in Western province, we have 100% Delta variant. So I believe that is because of this particular variant of COVID virus. So we see more and more heart attack patients in hospitals, and they're younger people actually. They don't have any conventional risk factors for heart attacks. No diabetes, no smoking, no hypertension. That's quite normal people. Just they get the heart attack, not even symptoms of the COVID, just heart attack. They get severe chest pain, they come to the hospital, take a ECG, we check the COVID is positive. When we do the dye test angiogram, when you see the pattern of block, it's mainly a blood clot, it's a thrombus. As no the cholesterol deposit you could see. So this is the situation at the moment we are facing with these COVID patients, especially at Delta variant in Colombo.
Thanks, Doctor. May I ask you please to stop your screen share because your view has been interfered with, because we have one more subsidiary question lined up. And that is, since you touched on the heart attacks increasing, there is also an anxiety that the vaccine itself can be deleterious or harmful for heart health. What's the reality? And you can stop the screen share if you can. That's great.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so the vaccine. Hello?
Yeah, the vaccine and what impact does that have on heart health, as some people are concerned?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe most of these patients, all these heart attack patients I saw, treated, I think almost all, everyone, was without without fully vaccination. So the couple of people had the first dose, but they were not fully vaccinated. So this is the most important thing, as Professor Pires, actually is one of my great teachers. He taught me in medical school. I must mention that now. And so as he highlighted, actually the vaccination plays a major role here. So the heart health, even that has a huge impact on cardiac or heart manifestation of COVID. The vaccination is paramount importance.
Wonderful. That's really very good to have heard from you. And we appreciate very much that contribution. Now we return to where we stopped off, and that's with Mr. Wijewardena. Please, let's hear from you. You might very well start speaking, Vijay. Then
I think I will do it without PowerPoint presentation, Arun, and thank you very much. As Professor Malik Pires and Dr. Gotabaya Ransingh have mentioned, we have to make a very important choice today, whether we have to save lives or whether we have to save the economy. And of course, we'll have to be mindful of the fact that even before the outbreak of this COVID-19 pandemic, Sri Lanka's economy was not in the best shape. It had been ailing for some time, and we had all types of macroeconomic ailments in Sri Lanka's economy, like the slowing economic growth, stagnant exports, our foreign resources have been dwindling, Sri Lanka rupee had been under continuous pressure for depreciation, inflation was rising, and we had the problem of mounting public debt and the national debt, which Sri Lanka has to meet. Now, all these problems are there. And what the COVID-19 pandemic has done is it has aggravated all these issues today. So we have to make a choice now, whether we have to keep the economy going or whether we have to keep the COVID-19 pandemic under control. Now, there are two schools of thought in this case. Some people say that the economy should be given preference and the COVID-19 pandemic is not a preferred or priority area. But of course, as economists, we have to believe in the fact that human life is invaluable. I mean, all these doctors, Dr. Gotabe Ranasinghe, Professor Malik Piris, and all the people in the health sector have given the highest value to human life, and also economists also give the highest value to human life. That is because the human life, unlike an animal like say a goat or a cow or a pig, humans don't have a market price because they are not traded in the market, because they were traded when there was slavery, but we don't have slavery today. But if you take a pig, the pig has a market price because there's a demand for the pig and the supply of the pig, and there's a market price. And when you pay the market price, you can do anything with the pig, but you cannot do that with human lives. Therefore, the protection of the human lives should be the highest priority of the state. And there is no any question about it. And in that sense, what the authorities can do is they have to identify two types of public enemies today. So one public enemy is the mountain outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The other public enemy is the suffering economy. Now, in the present case, since the human lives have the highest value, and also there is no any value that you can attach to the human life because they are so invaluable, the public enemy number one for authorities should be to beat the public enemy number one first and then go for the economic consolidation. So that is the economist's view on this subject. And in this case, when it comes to locking down an economy, again, there are two types of authorities. One type say we should not lock it down. The other type says we should lock down. And now we have come a middle way, or the smart lockdown. But whatever the terminology that you'll be using, one important factor that we will be using in economics is the multiplier effect. Now, this was actually introduced by Professor Malik Piris at the reproduction rate. Now, what we mean by reproduction rate is the same as what we believe in economics as multiplier, because multiplier is the number of things into which one variable can grow as a result of allowing that variable to function freely. If you take, for example, if you take a seed grain of seed paddy, so one grain of seed paddy can give life to one plant of paddy, and that one plant can give life to many tillers in the paddy bush, and those tillers will have, each tiller will have a bunch of things, and eventually one grain of seed paddy will produce a handful of paddy for us. So that is called the paddy multiplier. Similarly, there is an infection multiplier and the death multiplier. Infection multiplier is exactly what Professor Malik Piris had said as the reproduction rate. And if the infection multiplier is 1 and above, it will become an exponential growth in the future, and that exponential growth will become uncontrollable one day. As a result, we would lose the entirety of the human race if we allow it to rise above 1. And at the same time, the death multiplier is the same, because if the death multiplier is above 1 or above 1, again the number of people who will die as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic is totally intolerable. And once we use the part of the productive human life in the economy will also go. Good example is the Spanish flu that hit Sri Lanka also, Ceylon also in 1918, 1919. According to the Registrar General Department's data, the number of people who had died in the very first year of the Spanish flu had been about 55,000. but the Registrar General had not recorded the subsequent deaths. As you know, as Dr. Ran Singh had said, even the people who have died as a result of heart attack, rising from the COVID-19 infection, they should be categorized as the people who have died out of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the later virologists have counted the number of deaths relating to diseases like influenza till about say 1925, and they have calculated the total number of people who have died in Sri Lanka at that time was about say 307,000 people, which was equal to 6.7% of the population. So when you have a drastic decline in the population like that, naturally the economy gets affected. So therefore, in my view, what we should do is we'll have to give priority to the public enemy number one, which is the COVID-19 pandemic today. Try to beat him by locking down the economy, whether it is smart lockdown or full lockdown or partial lockdown, it doesn't matter. You have to follow, as Dr. Singh has said, the scientific criteria when you do so. And once you have brought the public enemy number down under control, you can go and address the issues in the economy. And in this case, I would like to specify here a few important acute problems that we have in the economy. One of the most acute problems that we are facing today is the shortage of foreign exchange. As a result of that, the banks have not got any foreign exchange with them to enable them to sell to their importers, and the importers have to wait in a waiting list to get the foreign exchange, and also the people who have the legitimate right to take their money out, they also have to wait today in Sri Lanka about say 2 to 3 weeks time to get the necessary foreign exchange. This was amply clarified by one of the international investment houses based in Chicago day before yesterday, called Fortuna, and they have said they had sold some of their shares in the Colombo Stock Exchange as far back as 5th of July, but they were able to take that money out of Sri Lanka only in early August. So what it means is they had to wait in the waiting list until the bank concerned had been able to collect sufficient foreign exchange to remit that money out. As a result of this chronic shortage, there is a parallel black market that has been developed. In the black market, the central bank, of course, says the official exchange rate is about say 203 rupees per US dollar. But commercial banks are selling the US dollar around say 220 rupees per US dollar. But in the black market, it is as high as 250 to 260 rupees per US dollar. So the existence of a black market is not good for a country, because we have now a multiple currency system. In the multiple currency system, everyone is under uncertainty. There is no stability in the market, and people have the uncertain future. When people have an uncertain future, they become panic. When they become panic, that is the worst thing that can happen to an economy. So what I mean is that the government will have to, while addressing the public enemy number one, it has to, on a priority basis, address the chronic foreign exchange shortage in the country, because it affects the importation of fuel, importation of medicine, importation of various goods that we need for the purpose of even beating the public enemy number one. So that has to be addressed. What the government has done is simply, it has actually gone for palliatives. They had tried to live on a daily basis by getting some handouts from the friendly countries like India, Bangladesh, and China, which will not solve our foreign exchange problem. But the international community expects that we should go to IMF and get an IMF package, so that the people outside Sri Lanka will have confidence in Sri Lanka. As a result, the foreign exchange will flow back to Sri Lanka again, and with that, we will be able to resolve this foreign exchange problem. And remember, this can be done while we beating the public enemy number one, the COVID-19 pandemic. I will stop here, and if there are any questions that you may want to pose to me, I would like to ask them right now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Vijayavardhana. We appreciated your comments very much, and sorry again about the hiccup with regard to your screen share. Now, there is obviously, as you have already intimated to us, a debt crisis that Sri Lanka faces, and how much more time can the country afford lockdowns? It's too much of a broad question, but I would like to have an opinion from you. How much more of slowing down can this place endure? If there's a thought that you might be able to share with regard to that.
Well, Arun, as I have said, we have to keep the system under lockdown until this infection multiplier and the death multiplier turns down to a number below 1, which was also emphasized by Professor Malik Piris in his address. He said the reproduction rate, it has to be below 1. And if it is below 1, it will become not an exponential growth. It will actually burn out itself continuously. So as a result, it's a gradual easing of the lockdown situation until such time we come to 0. Now I can give an example about this. Now if you take Australia, for example, Western Australia, the infection multiplier, they multiply at 0. Therefore, it's a completely free state. But in New South Wales, it is more than 1, and as a result, they are continuing with the lockdown situation. Victoria also, it is more than 1. It is continuously with lockdown situation. Now, today it was announced that the Australian capital territory, it is below 1. Therefore, they are easing the locking down process. And fortunately for New Zealand, which they started as Dr. Ranasinghe had mentioned, well before the first patient was identified, they also have brought it down below. The multiplier had been brought it down below 1. Now they also now have eased the locking down situation. Now, Sri Lanka doesn't have this particular choice, Arun, because it's a question of whether how much value that we give to human life. Because we are all here, we have the state called the Socialist Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, which is dedicated to protect the human life. So if we sacrifice human life, probably, as the Ceylon had experienced in 1918 and 1919 during this Spanish flu, the number of deaths may be, in 300 to 400,000, which we lose. And so we cannot give a value to that loss. It is invaluable.
Fine, thank you very much. And I just want to bring in Professor Malik Piris again. I hope you're still connected with us. There is a question that has propped up from those in the public who are watching this program, and they are very interested to know what your reading is from the analysis that you already have. How long is it that this trend of increases and deaths and all that, how long is it likely to last? What kind of estimate might we have, if Professor Malik can let us know?
So I'm not clear whether you're asking about the estimate if nothing is done. I mean, that's not the situation, right? I mean, already anyway, there are interventions, there's a lockdown of whatever in place. So I'm not exactly clear what the question is. Now, I think the issue at the moment, I think the immediate issue is how long we need to continue this particular intervention. And that, I think, really needs to be monitored on the basis of ideally monitoring this reproductive number. I mean, as Mr. Vijayawardena also pointed out, we can then see the outbreak is no longer exponential going up, but it's coming down. And then at what point you relax and how quickly you relax, because it's not a question of going from 100% to 0. It has to be a gradual relaxation, and that really needs to be done by monitoring this parameter. That's the smart way to contain this, because to be honest, there is no, we have to learn to live with COVID. I mean, it's not going to disappear. We have to live with it. And of course, the good side of it is we do have vaccines which are being rolled out, and that's extremely creditable. But as I mentioned, we need to target the most vulnerable and then gradually move to the rest of the population. Thank you. Over.
Fine, thank you. And also the question comes up, what about air travel? How safe is it, or how soon can air travel, in your estimate, how soon can it resume safely?
Well, if you're talking about safe air travel on the airplane, as you know, there are a number of carriers that are particularly from the Middle East, Qatar, etc., which are flying, and they are flying reasonably safely. But that is one issue. But if the other question is whether, the question of people coming into the country, whether they will bring in new variants. I mean, at the moment, of course, just bringing in virus is relatively irrelevant because we have so much, transmission taking place in Sri Lanka. But in future, and to be honest, at the moment, the most worrisome variant is the Delta variant. But there are newly emerging variants, and we should be careful, especially when we have people coming from those areas, that we don't introduce yet another variant into the country. So I think those are the things you need to think about. Over.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that clarification. Since we have Dr. Ranasinghe still with us, remaining with us, mention was made, I think Mr. Wijewardena made the observation that, about rising to 6%. What we really would like to have an opinion from you is, how much can our hospital system cope with that kind of rise? How much can our hospital system manage to deal with?
Yeah, I'm not a hospital administrator. Of course, by the understanding what's going on at the moment, working in the hospital sector, government sector, I understand the hospitals have come to that capacity now at the moment, and we are full. And so that you have to understand. So I don't think that if things are going far beyond this, so whether we have the capacity to handle. But so far, the government of Sri Lanka and the health sector, I think they have managed, I would say, well. And though with the coping with the rising numbers, we have managed well. And but I believe we are at the tipping point now. So at the moment, so if we go beyond this, if numbers are coming beyond this, then of course we'll have a lot of issues with oxygen supplies and the bed capacities, ventilators, etc. So we are in a very important, position when it comes to this pandemic situation, rather handling the pandemic situation in Sri Lanka. So this is a very important period. At the moment, we are in lockdown. I think we would be able to conquer the rise, this great rise of COVID cases very soon. As Professor Piri said, we won't see that now. Maybe that we will see it, of course, in about another week or so.
Thank you so much. Those are most interesting remarks and observations, and no doubt will be of great value to those that are following the program. Now it's time to engage with our panel. As you may know, we have 10 persons whom I'm very pleased to introduce by name right now. And then the proceedings will continue with the founding editor and CEO of Daily FT, Mr. Nista Kasim. But let me introduce our panel. We have the Honorable Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Coordination and Monitoring, and the State Minister of Digital Technology and Enterprise Development, Mr. Namal Rajapaksa. Thank you very much for being with us and giving us your time. And now, also, I would like to introduce the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, as well as of the Employers Federation of Ceylon, EFC, Mr. Vish Govindasamy. Then we have a former president of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, Dr. Ruiz Hanifa, who's with us in the panel, the senior consultant physician with the IDH, Infectious Diseases Hospital, Dr. Ananda Vijayavikrama. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Supun Veerasinghe is the CEO of Dialogue Agiata PLC. So we're having business folk also brought into the scheme of things. Mr. Sanat Ukwatta, President, Hotels Association of Sri Lanka. And also in hospitality is the chairperson of the Jetwing Hotels, Ms. Shiromal Kure. Thank you. Then we have Ms. Stasani Jayavardhana from the corporate sector. She's a director of Aiken Spence PLC and of Lanka Milk Foods CWE PLC. Then we have Ms. Aroshi Nanekara, wearing two hats on this occasion. She is president of the Rotary Club of Colombo, who with ICC Sri Lanka organizing this webinar, but she's also a director of Sampath Bank PLC. And last and certainly not least, Mr. Charit Subhasinghe, CEO, Keels, and head of retail industry group of JKH. That's our panel. And now I'd like to invite Nista to take over from here. So Nista.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Arun, and thank you very much for all the keynote presenters. I'll make it very fast. I'd like to invite Minister Rajapaksa to, I'm sure you would have heard the consensus from the three experts that lives matter, priorities for that. I want the minister to explain how government is battling these two crises, one saving lives and of course saving the economy, because even the opposition wants the government lockdown completely because of the death numbers and the cases. Minister, can you share what the thinking of the government is right now, and how successful have you been in terms of managing
the global situation and also the pandemic situation in Sri Lanka? I mean, any government, whether it's Sri Lanka or whether it's Indian or whether it's some government in Europe or anywhere in the world, the priority is to save lives. And and especially for us, we always believed in people-centric development. So we believe that people-centric decisions should be taken in order to make sure that everyone is safe and to make sure that we control the outbreak of the pandemic. But at the same time, when you are a government, you need to take tough decisions. And sometimes that decision might not be the most popular at that stage, but we do have to take certain decisions based on the people, and also at the same time based on economic activities as well, because it is the government who is responsible to make sure that the economy of a country move forward. And as we all know, I'm sure the panelists here are well aware, and they will be able to brief you more on this. Approximately 57% of our population are daily earners. And when you go for a lockdown, what's going to happen to them? And what is the outcome of a total lockdown after 14 or 15 days? And if the numbers goes back where it started, and we have seen this is happening most part of the world. I mean, if you look at India, they went for a 3-month lockdown, and then the third wave hit that then. Yeah, the numbers skyrocketed within a week or two. So as we all discuss here, what is the safest way and what is the best way forward? I mean, that is the key thing that the government is concerned. So we are concerned. We need to make sure that the outbreak is controlled, and we do work closely with the health authorities and take their advice. But at the same time, we also have to make sure that the economic activities keep moving forward, because most of I'm sure that we all agree that the foreign reserves is something, foreign revenue is something that we all are concerned about at this stage, and that was also been highlighted in the conversation. So the export industries have to continue, and we have to agree that the 4.5 billion or $5 billion we earn from tourism is no more, and it has gone down to $26 million or even less than that for last six to 7 months. So there are concerns, but we do have a plan, and we are closely working with the private sector, the corporate sector, because we believe this is the time we need to work. The government, opposition, the private sector, the government sector has to work together, because when you are infected from COVID, the COVID doesn't look who you are. whether you represent the government or the opposition or the corporate sector or daily wage earner, it doesn't matter. So we have a very much people-centric approach, and we do listen and closely cooperate with the health sector, but at the same time, we are working very closely with the private sector to make sure that the economy flow is moving forward.
Yeah, Minister, the argument for daily wage earners doesn't really happen when you have shut down rest of the your daily wage earners really depend on people coming to Colombo, working people and all. So that argument is very weak. How are you managing that? They are still, particularly the lockdown is not complete. Some people are in the city and others. So public sector is totally out of work. How are you managing that particular aspect?
Well, as a government, we intervened 4 times. One time we gave 5,000 rupees just before at the first outbreak. Then we went back again for 5,000 rupees. Then we gave another 5,000 rupees. Now we are giving another 2,000 rupees. So we are talking about more than 100 billion rupees to be given out for daily wages to make sure that they at least get the meals they are required. But that is not a permanent solution. So we do work closely with the private sector, the PHIs, to make sure that the factories are open, the industries are moving forward, and at the same time, to see the possibilities of keeping the daily economies moving forward. One thing is agro sector. So agro sector, we only talk about the farmers. So even though the farmers are allowed to go to the farming, or fishermen can go to the sea, but what about the crop? What about the transportation? Then you go back to distribution system. So we are very, very closely monitoring and working with the government agents to make sure that the supply chain continues, and at the same time, the essential services are continuing. But yes, there is a challenge. We have to agree, we have to accept that daily earners are suffering. So this is why we need to control the pandemic fast as possible or soon as possible. But yet again, we are battling with the time because the health authority says it's 14 days mandatory for quarantine period, or you need another 2 more weeks, or another 1 more week. So we are battling with the time. But at the same time, we also see that a lot of panelists here from the tourism sector. So we have more than 3 million people who are involved in the tourism industry. So SME sector, we try to keep them moving forward using e-commerce platform and supermarket chains, but yet the tourism revenue and the job opportunities that were created from the tourism is totally lost. So these communities, giving them 5,000 rupees for a boy who earned $1,000 per month is not going to work. So we do have a tough time as a country. So we believe we need to balance the lockdown, because we don't want to overload the health sector, as well as Dr. Gotabay was mentioning, because we don't want to overload the health sector, because that will not do any good to any economy or the country. So this is a balance that we are looking at, working closely. That's what we need to decide based on the weekly basis.
Okay, I know you have a busy schedule. I have 2 more questions for you. Earlier, it was mentioned that government must follow scientific information, and there is also criticism that the government is following military intelligence in decision making. Which is the correct? How being there, you think there is a lot of respect for scientific information and advice?
Of course, the pandemic is being dealt by the health authorities. So we do listen and we do work with the health authorities and the research that's been done by them. But at the same time, if you look at the vaccination rollout, the health sector itself cannot take the burden to themselves, because COVID is not only the issue that health has to face. There are many other issues, many other diseases or many other sicknesses that in the society that the health sector has to keep on attending. So vaccination is something that the health sector cannot do on their own. So we do, when it was required, when they requested the health authorities, the military was put to assist them for the vaccination rollout. And at the same time, then there was an issue of convincing people to come and get the vaccination. Because as you know, the media, the stories that going around about vaccination, at one point, we had to open a vaccination center and wait for 2 hours to get 5 people to come and get inoculated. So then we had to use the government mechanism, starting from GA to AGA to Grama Sevaka, the Gramia Committee, to convince people to come and get vaccinated. So it is a collective approach that the government is taking. And of course, we do use military intelligence and other intelligence services. to get information as to about the rolling out of vaccination and what sort of areas should be locked down and what are the areas there are the high number of cases have been reported, because we need to cross-check. We need to cross-check with the health authorities and all those departments. So, but the COVID committee headed by the President, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, is working based on the information and the numbers that are given by the health authorities.
Okay, thank you. You are very much involved in the vaccination rollout. Government did say 60% or plus by September. Are we there, or you think you need to push them?
Even while we are talking, we have 400 vaccination centers island-wide operating at this time, and it depends on the day. Sometimes it goes up to 600 centers, sometimes come down to 400. But in average, we do have 400 vaccination centers operating. And we have almost all the vaccinations that is available and approved by WHO being used in Sri Lanka. And the priority is given, as Professor Pires was mentioning, to the most vulnerable above 60. And then we looked at 30 and between 30 and 60. And now yesterday we started vaccination for youth who are between 20 and 30, and also the president is seriously looking at and waiting for the approval from the health authorities for the school children, because that is something that we are very keen, because most of us talks about the economic downfall, the economic impact, and also the impact from the COVID, but none of us talks about the mental impact and the mental health stress that all of us are going through, including myself and all of you. So this is something that we believe the post-pandemic, the countries have to look into, and the global leaders have to work together to come out of it. So economic frustration, economic downfall, economics do collapse, but it comes back. But if the people are physically and mentally not well, then we will have to face serious consequences on the long run. So we are seriously looking into that aspect as well. But vaccination is given priority, and we want to make sure that we are on time. And we have been always in number 1 or 2 in the world for the vaccination as a percentage. So we are looking at school children as well. And if we get the approval from the health authorities, by September, we will start, by end of the month, we should start vaccinating the school children, the age limit that they are going to give us.
Okay, this whole theme is about smart lockdown. The health experts have said to extend the lockdown till 2nd of October. You're taking a week by week approach. Will this practice continue? Because you're keeping people guessing every week.
Yeah, it's all depend on the numbers of cases and how much the health authorities can absorb it. But even though we are on a lockdown, we do have given the tourism industry to operate on a bubble, and also fully vaccinated tourists can come into the country and travel freely. And also we have allowed other certain industries to move forward. But we have to make sure that the numbers are controlled. So it all depend on the numbers that is going to come up with. But at the same time, the people also, including myself and yourself, we all have a responsibility. Once you give a freedom, once the lockdown is lifted, if you carry a wheelbarrow and go to a supermarket, that's not going to help anyone. And when you know there's a global pandemic, if you want a salary hike and you come into street with 1,000 of your most educated people in the country, that's not going to help any one of us. So I think with a smart lockdown, the smart community should also act smart as well, I believe. So if that happens, I'm sure we'll be able to face this pandemic as a group, as a team, as a country, and come out of it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Minister Rajapaksa, for your time as well as insights. I'll move on to the panel. If you want, I hope you can stay on for a while, but we'll take some questions from Vish. I want to move on to Vish as to what is the Ceylon Chamber's position in terms of lockdown. I know the private sector is not united. There is a segment that wants it to open up. Some people want to sort of keep it closed. What is the real position from the chamber, and are you happy with the current status quo?
Thanks, Nista. I think I beg to differ on the private sectors not being united. I think private sector is united when it comes to livelihood versus lives. I think it's very clear today, and I don't think I have to repeat it. It is the lives that are important. While we all understand the day workers needs a wage, etc., since the Honorable Minister brought that up, and now that he is responsible for the entire digital enterprise as well, I would like to see, and I think more people would like to see, these monies going into people's bank accounts directly and not making a showpiece of handing out rupee notes on tables, etc. I think it's very demeaning. So, sir, please, I think Sri Lanka has come a long way, and I think you can make that happen. Make it so that it goes to the people's bank accounts directly. As far as the Ceylon Chamber is concerned, I think the lockdown was imminent, the way we were going, but the industries are being allowed to work. Even the tourism sector in a bubble is being allowed to operate. There are obstacles. I'm not saying there are not obstacles, but we have to face the situation. But I would like to say, if we go back on relaxing, I think we have to take lessons from the previous lockdowns and not to go for a total easing off. I don't think, like Professor Malik Piri said, this pandemic is there to stay. So there is not going to be a total ease of things forever. So I think we need to take it in context going forward.
Okay, thank you. Before I move on to the tourism sector, Dr. Gotabaya, I have a question for you. This is being denied every time when this is posted. Can you confirm that the COVID is at community level transmission, or you still feel that we are far from it?
I think, Doctor, that's question should be fired at Dr. Vijay Vikrama. Is very much involved in that. But if I use my common sense, not the book, and it's in the community. Okay. I mean, what is community? According to previous Prime Minister in Great Britain, Margaret Thatcher, she said, individuals and families. That is community. So where are we? So all affected, families, individuals, all affected. So I think we have to redefine this. Whoever defined this community transmission, I think we have to get that book again and redefine it. So as a person, I believe it's in the community. It's gone all over.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Why I asked that, maybe Dr. Vijay Vikrama would like to get a comment from you as well before I move on to the tourism sector. Why I'm asking is because there is a fear that tourists are bringing COVID, but they are coming into a community anyway that is where the pandemic is already prevalent. So, Dr. Vijay Vikrama.
Yeah, thank you very much. As Dr. Gotabaya said, it is in the community. We see it is everywhere in the community. But unlike in last year period of say November or December, when we were limiting the incoming of tourists, thinking that they will bring COVID into the country. Now it is in our country. But there's another aspect to that. There are various variants of this virus. New variants are forming, and some of those are very rapidly spreading. What we have is now something like that. And and then there are other new variants too. So when people come and if they mix with our community, there's a possibility of spreading of these new variants within the community. So I am not saying that tourism should not be allowed. Actually, there was a very good plan made by the Health Ministry and the Tourist Board with regard to the development of tourism. By end of last December, it was in place. The plan was in place. But unfortunately, it did not go according to the plan. I think that was the problem. So there's a good plan. It is necessary to have tourism. It is necessary because we can't do away with that income for the country. But on the other hand, we have to get down our case numbers. Otherwise, the tourists will not come to the country. Our country will be a red country. Okay. So people will not come.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll move on to we have three leaders from the tourism industry. Actually, start from Sanat. It looks like they're giving priority for biosecure tourism, and there's a lot of support for the industry. you think you will get out of this crisis, or you feel that recovery is about 2 years away still? Sanat?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. for inviting us. Well, I mean, tourism is the COVID-19 actually has hit tourism very hard. And actually, as eminent speakers mentioned earlier, there are a number of interventions you could do to control this virus. And I believe, as Honorable Nama Rajapaksa so eloquently mentioned, that vaccination rollout is something that we as an industry is also looking forward to, because what we have seen happening both here and abroad, we see some light at the end of the tunnel now, because the more countries are opening their borders for fully vaccinated travelers, and the tourism around our region and the world recovering gradually. So we feel they are very hopeful that the revival of tourism will start by end of this year or earliest by mid next year. Having said that, our eminent speaker, Professor Pires, mentioned about the lockdowns, and he said that a 6-week lockdown will enable, with all probability, will enable the country to get into the green list of most European countries. So if I am given a choice, I would rather stick to that, because as you know, as you said correctly, even earlier speaker mentioned, that tourism cannot survive under these restrictive circumstances, environment. So we need to open the country. Tourism is an industry where interaction between people is a must. And therefore, we have to get our country's situation under control before we open the country up for tourism fully.
Okay, thank you. Shiromal, I'd like to ask you actually, I'm sure, are you kind of happy with the level of support that is given to tourism on a biosecure tourism? That's number one. And then also any further assistance? I know there is a debt moratorium going on, but there is also talk about a haircut, particularly the exposure to the industry. How far have you progressed in convincing the government and the central bank in this regard?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Actually, that should have been Sanat's question. Sanat is the one who's been really campaigning for that. So there is a lot of assistance being given, I must say, and we are thankful to them. The banks are also looking at tourism in a very positive way, so which is a good thing. But to answer your question about the support that is being given, yes, I think the medical profession as well as the government authorities are giving a lot of assistance. As Dr. Vijayawardene has said, there was a plan and in December, and that plan was continuing, and we were getting tourists coming into the country. But then there was this whole cry about the Indian tourists coming here and bringing in the COVID virus, which is unfortunately a false accusation. So because there was this whole situation that happened and the public outcry, I think government was kind of forced to stop that process from happening. So then it stopped, and now of course we are hoping to start, and it is started again. And I must say there is a fair amount of tourists that are coming in. They may not be your typical tourists, but we do see honeymoon couples, because Sanat did say that community involvement is important, but there is also another sector, like as I said, the honeymoon couples, people who want to come and see nature. Going to Yala right now is magical, you know. So there are people who appreciate this and who are also willing to come to the country. So I think if we are allowed to go in this so-called smart lockdown and balance the two, as all the other speakers were saying, I'm sure by around December, January, we should be able to come to a reasonably good situation. But I think we as citizens should also take a lot of responsibility, you know, not just take a false letter and run to see a friend, or, you know, I think we are adults. and we should be able to help our community and to keep them in control, because I think it's wrong to expect the government or the health sector or the armed forces to take care of us. We should also, as citizens, responsible citizens, take care, and hopefully we can all come out together.
Okay, thanks. Stashani, I'll move on to you. This question is, let's not talk about what happened in April, but prior to April, the real opening up, we did see hotel sector benefiting from domestic tourism, with situation improving. And I think Dr. Gota mentioned about smart lockdowns where you go to vulnerable areas lockdown. Is there hope for domestic tourism to take off? Because I think international tourism will take some time. They're highly sensitive. Where do you see prospects for domestic tourism, Stashan?
So right now, obviously, there is the interprovincial travel ban. So obviously, those bookings, I think all hotels had that have been postponed by all, clients of ours and those who wish to travel. There has been a demand across all hospitality arms for very unique, curated experiences amongst our local travelers, whether it's being hiking, revisiting, like Shiromal said, visiting Yala, to the uncharted beaches, because right now all of us, I think, are wanting to see Sri Lanka like we've never seen it before, given the opportunity that we can't travel overseas. So there's a lot of pent-up demand to honestly travel around Sri Lanka, providing the interprovincial travel restrictions are lifted. Perhaps there is a possibility if, the travelers are double vaccinated, similar to tourists, if we can show the vaccine card and if we can travel in between, there is hope for the hospitality sector as well as the travel companies to able to continue with some form of business while ensuring proper health and safety regulations are followed. Okay. Akin Spence Hotels and Akin Spence Travels from our end have made sure to, align our policies as well as health protocols aligned to what is expected by all health authorities in the country. And we've gone a step further to invest in certain electrostatic sanitizing machinery as an extra precautionary measure as well to our end. We've tried to maintain almost like if I take some of the factory settings within the group, for example, moving out of tourism, we've almost maintained it like a bubble while following strict health and safety guidelines.
Thank you. Minister Rajapaksa, if you're still there, I know last month there was a sort of suggestion that using of the vaccination card as a mode of entry, is that being relooked at, particularly following the suggestions that allowing people to take domestic tourism opportunities based on double vaccination?
Vaccine, the rollout and the vaccination card, the digital vaccination card, WHO with the Health Ministry and the ICT has done the technology. So it's out there now. So it's available. And there was a suggestion that at one point that for locals to move around during the lockdown, this was just before the lockdown, that we should allow the vaccination card to be taken and that is be a mandatory card. So that is something that we can do actually once everything settles down in another 1 or 2 weeks, once we open up. We can say, because probably by that time, we will have more than 75% of the population being vaccinated, given the both vaccine or fully vaccinated. And also we need to work with the other relevant international organizations for foreign travel and for foreign cars to be accepted in Sri Lanka. So this is something that the tourism ministry along with the health authorities is in discussion now, because even though we do open our airports, and if we don't accept their health authorities or their approvals to be considered as a valid approval in Sri Lanka, then it will not make any progress. So the tourism ministry is working closely with industry and the health authorities to see the potential possibility of accepting certain countries and also working on bio bubbles if required. So yes, we are looking at it, and once we open the country, or once the partial lockdown or the lockdown or whatever you call it is done, then we can look at the vaccination card to be taken into consideration when you travel within Sri Lanka as well.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Supun, I'll bring you in because we're talking about smart lockdown, and also I see that a lot of there is smart technology used, but we did see a lot of adoption, a lot of people embracing digital technology, but with the relaxation, again, people went back to the physical, and again, we have a kind of a semi-lockdown situation. Where do you see technology going forward in trying to support this whole smart lockdown concept?
Yeah, thank you, Minister, and thank you to the ICC and Dinesh for having me. Yeah, so technology plays a very big role, and I think to date the economy is functioning. We are doing this call as well as all the operations of the economy is happening because of connectivity. I think when we looked at the statistics, simply the internet adoption has increased 50% during this pandemic period. We had Sri Lanka had close to about 7 million, 6.5 million internet users. Now it has gone close to 11 million by now. So over the last 3 waves, we have seen consumers also getting ready to work from home, and they are becoming smarter. The first wave, we had a lot of challenges with consumers not having the right devices, the tools, the connectivity. Since then, every lockdown, consumers have got themselves ready. The networks have upgraded, networks have expanded to provide that connectivity. And I think though we might see that after a lockdown, people go back to their normal daily lives, the internet usage, the connectivity that they consume remains as is. There is no going down of that. For example, it took 15 years for us to get to 100 gigs of consumption of internet in our network, 15 years. It reached only in 2017. During the third wave, 100 gigs were consumed in 49 days. So consumption increased what it took 15 years in 49 days. And now in this fourth wave, we are seeing that happening in 30 days. So what was 49 days now became shorter to 30 days. So consumer is getting smarter. Consumer is not stopping their work because of a lockdown, and economy is continuing. And that's something that is really commendable. We are seeing some drops because of the education strike and all that, and that is unfortunate. But technology can significantly help in a smart lockdown through traceability, giving a digital card or a QR code which you can scan and see whether you are a green person or a red person, either to enter into a public area, cross a district. Technology can do, and also technology can help in identifying clusters. And then I think we have modeled based on some experience in China, how intelligently we can project potential clusters getting created. And there's so much we can do with technology. I think some of these we already work with the government and Ministry of Health in facilitating. Then I think we discussed about bed capacity, but now the government Ministry of Health has adopted remote care. The 1390 healthcare platform for home care now has served more than 45,000 patients. More than 45,000 patients otherwise would have needed hospitals have been served through the 1390 platform that has been created. That has been now augmented with the 1904 through SMS-based care. So even at a factory, we can use video analytics to identify if there are people who are breaching the distance, social distancing parameters. And so the technology is there, and countries like China, New Zealand, and more developed countries are using these technologies. We have, I think, looked at certain technologies with the government to facilitate, but overall, I think smarter lockdown requires the adoption of technology platforms to be sustainable and successful.
Okay, thank you. I move on to Charit. Supun mentioned about how people are adjusting. You all have experienced how consumers and your customers are adapting to technology with e-commerce picking up. What has been your experience, and you think lockdown going forward will not be a real nuisance for consumers?
I think, Nishtaq, we were all caught on the wrong foot the first lockdown way back over a year ago, where it was a big issue. I don't think any business continuity plan would have considered a situation of that nature. But since then, you could see that even from corporates to even the smallest grocery store, they have all adapted, and they have a genuine omni-channel business available. So that's the reason why, while food delivery scarcity was a big topic in the very first wave, March, April 2020, today it is not even spoken about. It's simply because there are innovative ways that people have adapted. If you could remember, even many years ago, our parents would have called the shop Rupa stores or Jaigiri, and a boy would come cycling with the stuff and deliver it to you. So even that simple mechanisms have now been used, and even WhatsApp in a order and getting delivered, while the corporates have invested in a much more robust online platform. So as Supun quite rightly said, we have also seen a change in the behavior of the consumer as well. So even end of each lockdown, the number of orders settle at a much higher than the pre-lockdown. So from an absolutely minimal number, today each customer has now settled into a preferred delivery mechanism. So what has also helped the positive is that digitization has also penetrated into our ways of working, from consumption to even ways of working, and those are the positives this COVID has also brought in, Nishtaq. That's how I would look at it.
Thank you. Arushi, sorry for keeping you waiting. How do you see, I know you deal with at leadership level, how do you see companies and leaders adjusting to the new lockdown that we talk about right now? And where do you see the biggest change coming from?
So Nista, if I were to wear my banking hat, I think the financial services industry, the banking industry, was the one that pivoted most effectively and efficiently when this whole COVID pandemic hit. Because as the banking industry, there was no way that we could be closed and let our consumers down, because the entire system would fail if you did not have the banking industry operating. So I think we did a tremendous job. All banks in the country did a tremendous job moving into that new normal. And if you take even today, we are on various hybrid platforms at the moment due to the lockdown. We are on full virtual. All meetings, all board meetings, all efforts are being, are carried through on the, the new way of working. So I think the impact has been minimized that way. And I think as a country and as a people also, we have gone through 30 years of war. We have had various other issues. And as Dr. Sven Hansen of Auckland says, who talks of resilience, resilience is also like a muscle that we train, like a muscle in our body that we train. And the more hardship we give it, the more bounce back or the more resilient we become. So I think we have done a great job in terms of adjusting to that new way of working.
Okay, thank you, Arushi. Dr. Hanifa, I wanted you to listen to all the comments so that you can sort of, we started from someone from the medical background. I want to finish it off also with do you see that Sri Lanka has sort of managed the challenges in terms of coping with COVID and arresting its spread? Dr. Hanifa, I just want you to, and how we can sort of use the smart lockdown as an option to manage.
Thanks, Mr. Thanks. So let me preface my comments by saying in this pandemic, to me, the virus is not the biggest problem. It's the social collapse the virus has caused. That is the biggest problem. The social collapse is due to what we as a society, as a government, as individuals have done or not done to control the virus. So your lockdown, your clinical management, your preventive strategies all come down to what you do or what you don't do. You lock down, you don't lock down, you give oxygen to a patient, you don't give oxygen to a patient, do you have the capacity to do so, and all that comes down to that. So as even health personnel, sometimes we tend to look at the individual signs and symptoms more than the social issues it's caused. Health is not only clinical, it is mental, physical, and social well-being in individuals, families, and the community. And curative healthcare and preventive healthcare are a part of this. So it's a wider picture, and I think we need to get used to seeing that. So like various speakers from the commercial sector have said, of course, their priority is wealth. Our priority is health. So how do you balance? Do you want health without wealth or wealth without health? It should not be an and an or. We should find a compromise as a group of people to do this. So let's very quickly, to come back to Nista's question, he asked me as a government or as an institute or whoever, are we doing right? So let me first, I think Professor Malik Piris mentioned this stringency index. So we are at about 83. But what he didn't mention was that stringency index of Oxford has various criteria within it. You might say you're locked down, but actually you're not locked down. You might say this, the commercial sector can come to work, but actually you're not there. So I think there should be a little bit of transparency and respect for people's intelligence and their concerns about this situation by decision makers, maybe health, maybe political, maybe economics. So that's another point I want to make. And also I would like to say about this, when you handle this issue, all we want to do is control the spread of the virus. The lockdown, all that is due to that. If the virus doesn't spread, we won't have clinical cases to look at. So the medics will agree with me that COVID, like you say, 80% is asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. 15% will need hospital admission, 5% will need critical care. So how are we handling this 80% is the issue. So to do that, let's get back to the transmission of the virus. So not to take on the government in any way, but just to say a fact as it is, currently we are in what you call alert level 3. According to the government definition, it says several clusters in different districts. So why can't we start there by classifying us as community spread and share that with the people? People will act differently. They will trust your advice more. So please take them into your confidence as medical people. We have been saying this from day one. Take the people into your confidence. Public health depends on public trust. If you do not have public trust, you don't have public health. Then you try to use other ways and means to enforce public health, which is, I don't think the principles of public health are applied. Then when we come to the alert levels, the WHO and various international organizations have reclassified this. So I would urge the health authorities, especially, of which I'm also a part of, to relook at this in a scientific way and advise the decision makers as to what to do. Let me conclude by telling you that data should drive strategy. Strategy should not drive data. You can't have a strategy and look for data to fit the strategy. You should have data and then build the strategy. Then, ladies and gentlemen, I think this smart lockdown will automatically come into play, and we will automatically adopt a system where we will have lockdowns in parts of the country, other parts of the country, and open the country up, and we'll be a nation with health and wealth. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hanifa. I'd like to go back to the panel from given the fact that private sector is satisfied or whatever, in a worst case scenario, if the lockdown is to continue, what would you suggest as sort of improvement to the existing arrangement that we are all country as a country we are going through in terms of lockdown? Do you want any particular thing lifted, or do you want anything to be strengthened? Because currently there is this notion that officially it's quarantine curfew, but everybody is on the streets. Businesses are doing, anyone who takes the risk can do business, whether it's a daily wage earner or otherwise, whether it's a shop owner. So it's not a disciplined or a conscious effort. As a private sector, what specific do you want the government to sort of ensure in saving lives and livelihoods, so that we will have a shorter lockdown effect? I mean, health experts have said till October 2nd, but I don't know whether we have the capacity to go on like that.
Maybe
if I can take that question, Nishta.
Yeah, I want some cross views from the panelists as my last questions to all.
Yeah, Nishta, if I'm to take it, Nishta, I think you're quite right. If I'm to talk about the industry that I am in, food delivery, food distribution, it is very, when the guidelines were given, it was very clearly mentioned that it is only for delivery as well as for mobile services. But if you look at today, if you walk onto the road, you'll see that the shops are open to all that. So I think the important thing, even for, as Professor Malik mentioned, whether we are going to go on a smart lockdown and to make it very effective, while the clarity was given by the guidelines, the commitment right from the top to everyone to ensure the adherence to that guidelines is going to be important, or otherwise it's going to be a bit of a fast. And as Dr. Hanifa also mentioned, it is important for us to ensure governance of that guideline, or otherwise it's going to be a fast and people are, not going to take it seriously. So if you are to go down Dr. Professor's route, I think that adherence and also very clear consequences if somebody doesn't adhere to those processes, protocol, and implementation of those consequences are going to be very important, or we will be talking about this for many more months, unfortunately.
I welcome comments from the rest of the panelists also. Please contribute to this.
Nista, this is from Vish. I think I am 100% with Dr. Hanifa's comments. We are all responsible people. I think allow data. Supun spoke about technology. Allow technology to work, allow data to work, let science work. I think a lot of these things need to be the decision making on where lockdown should be and how lockdown should be implemented. And also a key in this is communication. And one person to communicate. We have everybody and sundry who is taking the authority to talk about, one day it's somebody with one title, another day another. The people also completely confused as to what is going on. So maybe we should have one or two people on the health and the lockdown, etc. Then people look up to that person, trust that person, and then we go forward. We have done a lot of go forward, reverse type of thing. We can't have that. Then people lose faith. So I think those are the things that I would recommend to go forward. And also, I know the government has a very large task force. Private sector has no seat in that task force. I think they should hear our voices as well. So we can, not that we want to influence any decision, but at least they get to hear what's going on the private sector side. Somebody like Supun should be in that task force, giving the technology, right? And what technology, and everyday technology is evolving. So he can make those available. So those are my suggestions.
Mr. If I may,
yes.
I would like to say that in Professor Malik's presentation, I think we see a very clear correlation between the number of cases and the lockdowns, how it comes down, how the wave comes down. But we need to bring in, now Sri Lanka, today's, your paper today, I think said 75% vaccination, both doses. Yes. We need to, there would be a negative correlation to that number when the vaccination comes in. So we are not seeing that in that graph. So we need to be looking at what is that negative correlation and how does the vaccination program help to flatten that curve. So I think that needs to be something that the doctors have to bring in, right? Because if you take the United States, they didn't go into a lockdown, right? So they took a very hard decision and they said, let there be fallout. And yes, their death rates were very high, but they are at an all-time high in terms of their vaccinations. The UK is the same. And Sri Lanka is hitting somewhere there now. So I think we are progressing really effectively. So in a situation like that, where the vaccination rates are at 75, 80%, where you're hitting herd immunity, then do we still need the lockdowns? Do we still need a smart lockdown? I think we need to address that in order to be able to say, yes, we still need pockets of areas of lockdown. I'm looking at it also from the Rotary Club of Colombo. We are looking at how many people we are helping out who have lost their livelihoods. We are going out there, 3,000-4,000 people. We are donating dry ration packets, right? Corporates have donated millions of rupees to us for us to distribute. So while there is a death rate, Sri Lanka is anyway at one of the highest suicide rates in the world, right? We are not even measuring those statistics of how the pandemic has affected people's mental health and what the suicide rates are at the moment. So I think, again, we need to look at it in a very, very comprehensive way, in a holistic way. Thank you.
Supun, you had something to say?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we also need to recognize the frontline workers, apart from health, banking, in telecommunications, who are not vaccinated today, but carrying out essential work, keeping the country connected and economies going. So I think now, as we have started the under 18, under 30 vaccination, I would urge for some prioritization of these staff who are in frontline, serving the country, serving the economy, and keeping all of us connected. The other aspect is that I think we had a QR method when the Stay Safe Sri Lanka program. Maybe it can be extended to capture those who are vaccinated, if you are to allow for public transport or to public places. This is one of the early measures that China took way back in March 2020 to control the pandemic and allow people who are having less exposure. So today we can use that for vaccinated people, and that way we can minimize the potential impact on the economy as well as livelihoods.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Vijay Vikrama, I'd like to focus on this. We had a crisis of beds, oxygens and all that, and then resorting to imports, urgent imports from India with regard to oxygen. I mean, how can we prevent such a emergency situation? There was a lot of criticism. I think Minister Rajapaksa did launch a 10,000 bed initiative. Did we lose track of it, or did we sort of did we get complacent in the midway? I want Dr. Vijay Vikrama to sort of put a sort of assessment on the capacities right now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, as Dr. Gotabe mentioned, we are at the moment we have reached the fullest capacity. Any more cases, it will be a problem. Problem means loss of lives, loss of capacity, and loss of manpower. So it affects not only the health, it affects the society and the country. So I don't think we can look at this as a problem of health. I don't like this word lockdown. What we need is good restrictions. We have to select areas where we need to have restrictions with minimal economical impact and with the best impact on the spread of the virus, to prevent the spread of the virus. So that is what is necessary. For example, we can, of course, if we reduce the number of people in a wedding, there can be some economical impact, but then that will be minimal. That is what I understand. I'm not an economist, but that is what I feel. So likewise, we have to select areas and have restrictions on those. I think we made a big mistake by relaxing fully at the end of July. I mean, that led to this outbreak, and the lockdown came too late. That is why when it comes too late, we have to prolong it for a longer period. When we are doing the lockdown, we have to do it at the correct time so that the impact of the lockdown will be minimum and or other restrictions will be minimal. So I think that is what is necessary. And what happens is when we get more cases, there are more complicated cases, more people who need oxygen, more people who need ICU care, and then we don't have enough manpower. Having just beds is not enough. That is enough when we consider the previous adopted the method where we were admitting all the patients. That was mainly to observe and to prevent spread. But when it is in the community, there's no point of admitting everybody. So that's why we have adopted to change to this home care system. So now what we need is actually the hospital beds, not this intermediate centers thing. So it is necessary to cut down the numbers. Otherwise, this will, if this continues at a higher rate, then the not only the health sector, the society will be at having problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Pires, are you still online with us?
Yes, I'm online. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Professor. I mean, this is my final question, and there is some again theories coming up that usually pandemics last for 2 years, and the end is near. I mean, you would have also heard it. How reliable, or do you see the pandemic going on for end of 2023 or 2024?
So, I mean, I think this virus will be, as I mentioned, with us for forever. It will become a routine virus. Now, the question is the impact, is the impact mitigated to a sufficient level that it is no longer a major threat? I mean, if you go back to 2009, we had influenza pandemic, a new virus. And after some time, now it is still there, but it's a seasonal influenza virus. There's no major impact. So that's exactly why I said we have to learn to live with it. Now, how long the impact of this will go on is a bit difficult to ascertain because we keep on these new variants emerging. I mean, to be honest, if not for this Delta variant, I think many countries, and including Sri Lanka, would not have been in such a difficult state. I mean, this Delta variant is so much more transmissible that that even in vaccinated people, it may infect them. It may not cause serious disease, but it will infect and may also transmit to a lesser extent than on vaccinated people. So we still cannot predict what other variants may arise. I think it was mentioned that there are already 1 or 2 out there, which I'm particularly concerned about, one in South Africa, one in South America. So it is a bit difficult to be certain, but I think there's no question that we need to get back towards normal once we have a well-vaccinated population. But I really want to emphasize again, the problem is, although large numbers of people have been vaccinated, which is very commendable, we still the 75% of deaths are still occurring in that over 60 age group. And most of those people who are dying are not vaccinated. So we need to look into exactly what is the problem. I mean, is it hesitancy on that part, or is it delivery because the older people find it more difficult to come, or they can't come and compete with the younger people for vaccine? So this is still, I think, a major priority, because if we can sort that out, particularly as I showed you, I mean, over 60, over 50, etc., fully covered, I think the threat of this pandemic will become much less. Thank you. Over.
Okay, thank you.
You're on mute, Mr.
Mr. You're muted.
Mr. Nista, you're on.
On behalf of the FT and rest of the organizers, thank you very much. My time is over. I'll give it on, pass it on to Dinesh. I know there are a lot of questions, but I think in the interest of time, I dropped a few questions. So thank you very much for giving some insights to get smart lockdown right. I was looking at a worst case scenario, hence I sort of pushed you guys to come up with some suggestions governments to make it really smarter, so that public will believe what's happening. There is trust in the system. Over to Arun and maybe Dinesh as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nista, for handling that session and for as much time as you did in covering so much ground. Yes, indeed, we must move on. What Dinesh Virakodi will now do is take on board the different questions that have come up from the platform, the FP platform. Yes, over to Dinesh.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you, Nishta. What I will do is I've got a whole lot of questions from on SMS and on these platforms. So I try to summarize some of these, but I'd like to start off with a very important question to the three keynote speakers. The question goes, if the economy dies, more people will die. Deaths will be more than 1%. So how do we balance this? Can I start with Professor Malik? Shall I repeat the question? If the economy dies, more people will die. Deaths will be more than 1%. So how do we balance this?
I mean, clearly, it is just as bad to die of starvation as it is to die of the pandemic or die of anything else. There's no question about that. I think it's all a question of how we balance, the adverse health outcomes and maximize the performance of the economy. And I think that is exactly what we were discussing, today, I hope. Over.
Dr. Gota?
Yeah, Dinesh.
The question reads, if the economy dies, more people will die. Deaths will be more than 1%. So how do we balance this? By the way, this question is from an exporter.
Yeah, same thing as the same view I have as Professor Malik Piris said. I always mention this analogy. So we have to balance and we have to sail in between economic impact and the health impact. We know, and we can't divert to one of those. And so we have to be in the middle, as the ancient sailors in Greek said, that they were careful. And so I think this is a very difficult situation. We can't blame anyone. So what we have to do is we take the collective approach and the data and the science. And so we have to be in the middle. So saving the economy, saving the lives. We can't take one side. This is my theme of my speech as well. So we have to have this middle approach because both we can't take one side more than the other, because then we'll have problems.
Okay. Vijay, are you still there? Maybe Vish also can comment from the private sector side.
Yeah, Dinesh. Yeah, I'm no different. I think you can't go on one side. I said this before, it's lives versus livelihoods. I don't think as human beings, we have crossed over to the path where we can compromise on lives. So I would say lives are important at this stage. It doesn't matter from where you are. So let's preserve lives right now. And then there are lots of other things that we can do to keep our economy intact. If we can reverse all the things that we have done wrong, we can go and fix them. And I think our economy can be worked on.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. This is from a doctor. I'm confused with the real meaning of a smart lockdown. Is it a hybrid lockdown that you're talking about? So I'll let the doctors answer that. Prof. Malik, maybe.
So I think a smart lockdown is a data-driven intervention. As I said at the beginning, and I think somebody else also said, I don't like the use of the word lockdown because it implies all or nothing. That is not the case. As I showed you, and indeed, even the Oxford Stringency Index, as I showed, but of course very quickly, has a number of parameters. And then I showed you the most effective intervention measures. There are a number of parameters. So I think the important thing is to be data-driven, but also to use the leading indicators, not wait until your ICUs are full and hospital capacity is exceeded, because once you get there, even if you come down with the most vigorous lockdown, that tanker, that super tanker that you saw on the sea is going to continue to sail for many more weeks to come. So you have to intervene early, and that has to be done on the basis of data. Over.
Thank you. Gota, do you like to comment as well?
I don't think that. I think he answered the question fully, sir.
Okay. This next question is for Vish and maybe Sanat. The question goes: many business owners are at a financial breakdown. Can the chambers intervene to help these guys?
I think it's a tough question, Dinesh. All businesses, when you run businesses, you have to always anticipate there's going to be a rainy day, right? So you can't expect any government, anybody to help your business, even though this is beyond anybody's doing. This is a world pandemic. Yes, the governments are coming forward to help, but the companies or the businesses also have to help themselves. A lot of hardships people have to, make hard decisions people have to make in these difficult times, right? So I think it's not, very easy to just bank on the government and say government must help. Just commenting on the previous one, everybody keeps speaking of this word lockdown. There are some countries are using something called MCO, Movement Control Order. I think it's much better than a lockdown, which is also something like a smart lockdown.
Okay. Vish, you're also the chairman of the Employees Federation of Ceylon. How are the trade unions responding to this crisis?
Actually, I must say they've been very cordial. We have had that tripartite agreement. I think the tourism sector will agree. With the Labour Ministry, we've been able to get a lot of things done. They have been very cooperative. So I think they understand. And because at the National Labour Commission, we have had good dialogues with trade unions and they are willing to cooperate. They understand the issue. So I think I must give a lot of credit for both the Ministry of Labour, the Commission of Labour and the trade unions, EFC, and even the private sector all agreed on the tripartite agreement and it's still intact.
Thank you. This is a tourism question. Maybe Sanat should lead the charge. Sanat, are you there? Yeah, the question reads: the tourism sector will recover only in 23. What support does the industry need? And are they getting it? There are three people on the panel, they can respond, starting with you.
Thank you. First of all, you asked about the question about the chambers. I must thank the chambers for helping tourism industry, especially with the negotiation with the unions and signing of the tripartite agreement. And it has been expired, but now I think they're trying to renew it. But nevertheless, it was handled very well in the past, and we hope the EFC will continue their momentum and they will be able to sign this fresh agreement soon. As we all know, the tourism is yet to recover, and we need all that support from everyone. Especially the government has been always supportive of us. And right now we have a ballooning, interest costs, and tourism debt needs to be restructured and reprofiled. We have requested the government, together with the banking sector, to waive off the ballooning interest costs during the moratoriums and to restructure our debt over a longer period of time. So we are hopeful that the government will and the banking sector will get together and help us to address this, because if you don't help the hotels to stay afloat, if the hotels go under, they are destroying countries' ability to earn much needed foreign exchange in the future. So we got to maintain the hotels, and we need to ensure that the staff are intact, because about 80% of our staff are well trained, and we are still paying their salaries in spite of having basically no income. So we have been continuing that for 1 year now, and we have come to the brim, and we can't continue in this manner anymore. So we are very conscious of this. We want the country to be safe. We want tourism staff to be safe. But yet there are 3 million stakeholders out there, and their livelihoods are also at stake. So we need to have a balanced view, and I believe that tourism should restart in a controlled manner by ensuring the strict health guidelines what the health sector and the government has introduced.
Right. Shiroma, can I move to you? And if you can say 1, 2, 3, these are the 3 things we need from the government and also from the financial services sector.
Yeah, so since Sanat touched on that, and can I answer your question about 2023? I think we don't have the luxury to wait till 2023. The country also needs the foreign exchange very badly. And as Sanat said, the hotel sector will not survive if we have to wait till 2023. So we need the cooperation of everybody to help us to restart the tourism sector, not because wealth is important than health. Health is very important because without health, there is no point in having any wealth. So we are responsible people. We will follow all the guidelines that are being given. And we would expect, if this pandemic is contained right now, we will be able to again get into the proper list, the red list, the amber lists and the green lists, and get the tourists and get to the country the vital foreign exchange it needs, and also run our businesses in a responsible way. Thanks, Dinesh.
Thank you. Sasani?
Yes, I think Mr. Sanath and Ms. Shiroma actually summarized everything well, but I will add one thing is consistency in terms of policies. I think all leaders, whether it's private sector or government sector, needs to work together to ensure we don't close our borders as a country for international tourists. Because like Mr. Vish at one point said, like we are going back and forth, like policies are made, then they're getting reversed. So there needs to be a consistency to ensure to instill confidence with overseas operators, agents, airlines, and even amongst hotel brands to actually promote not only the hotel, but the destination. So when you keep on reversing, I understand it's due to the current COVID spike, but when we keep on going back and forth, there's a loss of confidence amongst them to promote us as a destination. So that can be detrimental for our country and tourism sector as a whole. And also, secondly, like again, Ms. Shiroma said, we can't wait till 2023. Otherwise, we'll have a lot of entrepreneurs who invested in the tourism sector, as well as other entrepreneurs and SMEs who are connected indirectly to our sector, losing their livelihoods, right? So we need to get things going, and especially to ensure that the trained staff and those trained within our sector is a part of our hospitality industry, a part of our companies. We need to get it going. Because right now, not only locally in Sri Lanka, but internationally, there is a trend where a lot of individuals are shifting away from the sector. And that's going to be another lag of time where if they do not return back to the tourism sector, then we have a huge challenge in terms of retraining a whole cadre of staff going forward.
Okay, thank you. Professor Malik, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
But any advice you can offer the tourism sector to get over this crisis in a very planned, structured way?
Yes, I mean, I think somebody mentioned the plan that the Tourist Bureau put forward last December, I think it was. I think that was, I mean, I don't know the full details, but what I have heard of it, it was a reasonable approach. And I think, of course, one has to be, as I said, be careful about certain regions of the world where we see dangers emerging from. So, I mean, different countries put complete bans on people coming from certain areas because there are worrisome variants out there. So I think we have to look at that. But I think, the approach that was taken, which might need modification now, of course, was not unreasonable. Over.
Okay, thank you. Supun, there's a question for you. Supun, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah. Supun, somebody wants to know any big ideas you have from the telco industry to help the authorities to contain the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we have been engaging. So the key would be, I think, given that Dialogue Network is the largest and we have larger visibility, we have been able to help in picking some, but one initiative that the entire industry can do is to help in this smarter lockdown by identifying hotspots and then helping those areas to be locked down. That's something quite a no-brainer, but requires everyone to come together and the customers to support as well, because we always talk about this, but we need to also recognize that 50%, close to 50% are 2G phones, which doesn't have the location accurately. Only in the smartphones we can have that location enabled, so that even if somebody has a digital certificate, we can be able to pick those areas. But in the absence of that, we have to use some approximations in identifying the clusters and locking them down. So that can be done. The other most important aspect is to use a digital certificate. I think the government has now moved into a digital vaccination, but to use that in everyday life, from getting into a bus to getting into a public area, that will on one hand encourage people to vaccinate, because otherwise you can't get out of the house. On the other hand, it also protects everyone in the society that new variants and stuff that the medical professionals mentioned can be contained. Because I think there is no solution to this in addition to the vaccine than using technology. There is no solution. So it is adoption of this, and it cannot be, again, just like the vaccine, requires adoption by majority. If only a few adopts, like the Stay Safe QR, only few adopts and others don't bother recording their entry, then it doesn't help. So everyone has a responsibility to use the technology, support the government in this, because there's also lots of concerns about data privacy, your individual privacy, but you need to also look at when do you draw the line, whether it's the livelihoods, whether you compromise a bit on your privacy, but help the country continue its economy, and that give and take, everyone has to support. So there are solutions. I think we can look at bringing them together in a smarter lockdown, but we require public support.
Are you a member of that committee?
Yeah, so we have been, it is more, Dinesh, in direct engagement with the TRC, ICTA, on facilitating this. In terms of, it also is dependent on the priorities at that time. So we really got involved in the first wave in facilitating it. In the recent waves, we have been more supporting the healthcare, remote healthcare. Even I think Dr. Hanifa was involved in 247. So now all service providers have enabled free of charge calling to 247 to get help, medical help. So stuff like that. But what we can look at is if there is a call from the government, we will be happy to come forward and support. Recently, there was a call to enable remote or SMS-based home care. The team from the industry enabled within 24 hours. They worked overnight and enabled that solution. So industry is ready. I think depending on the government's readiness and the priority, we will be there to support.
Okay, Shiromal, there's a question to you. Somebody wants to know why the industry is very slow when it comes to giving hotels for quarantine centers.
I think that's
people are struggling to find rooms.
I think that's a very unfair statement, because way
public
before
perception.
I know that sadly that is a sad thing. I think very early on there were about 5 or 6 companies that came forward and gave in hotels for quarantine, and at that time we were not even expecting any payment for it. It was given free of charge. But it was later on the government came forward and said they are spending 7,500 rupees a day and they're willing to pay it to the sector. So then there were lots of other hotels also came forward. So even right now, many hotels are ready to give hotels for quarantine. I think so. I don't think that's accurate. I'm Sashani will also, and Sanath, we have all given now hotels.
Dinesh, if I
Sanath
could,
is smiling, maybe I'll ask him to come in.
Dinesh, if I could add to that, what
Yeah.
Shiroma said, right now there are over 4,500 rooms have been offered as intermediate care centers. And these centers have really expanded the capacity of the health sector. Just imagine if you don't have that 4,500 hotel rooms today, where would these patients go? The hospitals, whether it's government or private, they're all at the maximum capacity. So hotel industry has played a tremendous role in the fight against this pandemic. And this is something that people should be aware, and that industry is very proud of their contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Aroshit, maybe you should respond to this question.
Sorry, Dinesh, if I can add on to what Mr. Sanath and Ms. Shiromal both said. A lot of the hoteliers have been working with hospitals, but for the hotels located specifically outside of Colombo, hospitals have been reluctant to partner up and take on that challenge to convert it to an ICC center. One, because of the fact that most patients, all the doctors on this panel will, I'm sure, confirm it, most of the patients, especially with the Delta variant, had required very critical ICCU facilities for treatment. So at intermediate care centers, unless we have at least a small setup with ICC facilities, the hotels have been reluctant to take it on board. And obviously, there was some issue with the oxygen supplies the last couple of weeks. So then that had deterred them away actually from taking some hotels on. That is my understanding, and we've experienced the same thing.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I'm missing Namal here. But Aroshi, maybe you should respond to this question. There has been so much of digitization in the financial services sector, but despite that, all the branches are getting crowded, even during this quarantine curfew. What is the way forward?
Again, I don't agree with that statement, Dinesh. If you take even before the pandemic, a lot of people were converting to the digital platforms and to the ATMs. There is about a 80% uptake on the ATMs and the digital platforms, both internet banking and the ATM, so that physical entry into a branch is not required. So I don't think that is correct. Because we have the statistics that are being monitored on how many have converted. And we have even Sampath Bank has launched a touchless ATM, where you just scan your QR code and the money just comes out of the machine. So a lot of things have been adopted, I think, by the banking industry, where it has made the branch still a relevant part of it, because you will still come in for some trade finance or whatever, but not for just the very mundane banking work. And in terms of the quarantine hotels, I just wanted to say, New Zealand is supposed to be one of the best countries handling it best. And you have to book your quarantine hotel before you book your travel, right? They're completely booked until November. December, January, February, not even open. So daily we are checking. I need to go into New Zealand and I'm a permanent resident. Daily you have to check morning and night to be able to just get yourself in, right? So I think we are a little spoiled as a community. We don't see the good stuff that we have here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Charit, are you on? Charit?
Yes, Dinesh.
Yeah, Charit, somebody wants to know whether there is actually a big food crisis as the media tends to outline.
Dinesh, how I will look at it is that when it comes to food security as well as the cost of food going up, I think we are blessed with one thing, is that food was never an issue in this country, simply because of the agriculture practices, the water, to all that. So it's like this. I think as Mr. Vijayawardhan also mentioned, there is an exchange issue that is there. increases almost all the manufacturers have taken simply because of their raw material cost going up to all that. I don't see an issue of famine, starvation, or any extreme conditions of that nature. And as Aroshi said, that unfortunately our population is pampered to that extent where they don't want to change their behavior, their eating habits, whatever, and then they start complaining, unfortunately. So I think in a difficult situation, we are still good there, but there will have to be some changes in the ways of working in terms of your consumption. As Dr. Gotabaya Ranasinghe mentioned, you visualize the two extremes and how do you find a middle path on trying to manage it, especially in that context. That is how I would look at it, Dinesh.
Okay, thank you. These three questions are for the doctors. The first question is, can the Delta variant evolve into a deadlier virus? Who likes to go first? Prof, you like to?
Yes, well, of course it can, but there are also other variants that are emerging. So this is what I meant. So at the moment, there's a global surveillance, on these mutations that are arising. Mutations per se may not mean anything, but it's also important to understand whether they have any functional relevance. So there's a global effort coordinated by WHO, which I'm also involved in. So yes, the Delta variant has already undergone some changes in different places, and including, as I understand, in Sri Lanka, but whether those will have a major impact or not is left to be seen. But generally speaking, I think we have to accept that this virus will continue to find ways to evade our defenses. So what we have to do is, as fast as possible, put up our defenses, and that means I come back to this like a broken record. Firstly, properly, effectively vaccinate the most vulnerable. And I'm afraid we haven't achieved that yet. Over.
Okay. Next question, maybe Hanif, would you like to respond? Dr. Hanif? Dr. Hanif, can you hear us? Yeah.
Yeah, what was the question?
There's a question here, will boosters be required and when?
Yes, actually that should be answered by an immunologist, but with the little knowledge as a general practitioner I have, I'm asked this question all the time. Yes, so as we know, the immune response is generated by your natural immunity or a vaccine-based immunity, and it comes up to a level, and after sometimes it wears off. So I think Professor Malik Piris will also agree with me. We don't know when these immunities will wear off or whether they are lifelong or so on, because we are a little early into the disease phase of this. So at some point of time, with our experts advising us, I think all over the world and even in Sri Lanka, we might need a booster to get this immunity back, because like Professor Malik said, this virus is going nowhere. But the question to answer that is, what type of strains are you looking at that stage you're giving the boosters to patients? So at that time, I think our experts will have to evaluate and tell us these vaccines which are available are effective against these variants at this time, or perhaps not. So at that time, we will have to make a call. So as it is, the answer to your question is, in my personal opinion, yes, we'll need boosters, but I don't know what boosters we'll need for what type of variants we'll be facing in the next couple of months or way into the future. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Professor Malik, there's a question for you. Somebody wants to know about herd immunity, whether that will help us to open the economy.
Yes. So, last year or early this year, with the vaccines becoming available and it being clear that the vaccines seem to be extremely effective, there was hope that you will achieve what is called herd immunity. I mean, what this means is that there are enough people vaccinated or naturally infected that are immune to the virus, so the virus has nowhere to go, right? And ultimately, it will die out. Now, unfortunately, with the emergence of the Delta variant, because it is so infectious, you the virus can infect people, a few people who are even vaccinated. So it's less likely, but it can happen. And they can also transmit. So given that situation, I think, trying to look at this elusive herd immunity is not the priority at the moment. We need to save lives, serve ICU beds, save oxygen dependence and things like that. And this is where I come back. I don't want to say it yet again, but I think we have to protect the most vulnerable. That is the issue. So I think looking for elusive herd immunity, hopefully in the future with better vaccines, I can indeed explain why, even though the vaccine does a good job in protecting against severe disease, it doesn't protect from infection of the nose. Because, what you get is an injection in the arm, you get good antibody response in the blood, that goes into your lungs and protects you from severe disease. But that protection does not really effectively get to your nose and mouth. That requires either natural infection or a different type of vaccine. So I think trying to be hung up on herd immunity now is not the priority. Over.
Okay. I don't know whether it's fair to ask you this question, Professor Malik. There's a question here, which COVID vaccine is the best?
The first vaccine you can get. Over.
Okay, thank you. Right. To close this session, I have a question for the entire panel. Given that we have to live with this maybe for the next 2 years, what are your final thoughts? Maybe I'll start with Dr. Gota. Keep the answer short, please.
Yeah, so my answer is very positive. I think we have to learn from the past. And we had this, the Spanish flu, and then thousands and thousands of people died. But later on also episodes came that we got the vaccines done and we developed the herd immunity. Now we have conquered. And that is a part of, the virus is a part of our life. It's all over now, that virus, but no harm given. So likewise, this particular virus, we take the life a little positive way. This particular virus will not the mutation, we hope, but settle and become a benign virus. And with the herd immunity, with the vaccination, and as well as with the natural immunity, I think it will merge with the other the viruses we have. Like we have even the common cold, like they are also coronaviruses, but they are very innocent. And so most of the time, and likewise, this virus also will be like that. That's my positive take-home message.
Thank you. Vish?
Yeah, very short. Believe in science, technology, and data. And I want to thank Professor Malik Piris for making it very clear it's the first vaccine that matters and not the brand.
Thank you. Shiromal?
I think Aroshi spoke of resilience. I think we are all very resilient. So I'm quite confident that with the technology and the data that we'll be able to have, we should be able to adapt and get on with it.
Right. Thank you. Shasani?
I think everyone has summarized everything pretty well. I think all corporates, all individuals should encourage each other to take the first vaccine available at this point. Immunity, at whichever the vaccine, immunity is critical for everyone as a nation, right? And to reiterate that whether it's the private sector or the public sector or authorities, everyone has to work together to come through these times, because it takes a combined effort to ensure, we look out for each other individually, but as a country, as business entities and government authorities, we have to come through surviving this pandemic.
Thank you. Supun?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's about taking care of each other, using technology platforms, and be open to change, because this change is going to be there, and thrive with this change. And Sri Lanka can thrive in this new environment that we are going to see if we adopt technology, and we can become much greater than we started this pandemic if we adopt technology and thrive in this new normal. Thank you.
Thank you. Arushi?
Dinesh, first and foremost, vaccination. I think the government is doing a tremendous job in getting us to that level where I think Professor Malik was talking of. We are also in touch with the Ministry of Health through all of the work that we are doing from the Rotary end. And there are about 10 to 15,000 people who are unvaccinated, who are out there. They're doing mobile camps to the houses, and these people are not coming to get vaccinated. And the MOH is saying, what do we do, right? So you still can have 10 to 15,000 more people dying simply because they're refusing to get vaccinated. So I think you will have fallout. At one point, we had, I think, more road accident deaths than the COVID deaths, right? So whatever the avenue, we will have some fallout, some level of fallout where you will have death. But I think we need to get on with the vaccinations, open the economy and get going.
Thank you. Sanath, are you still there, Sanath?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I mean, the tourism industry has been devastated by this pandemic. And what it has taught us, the people who are engaged in the tourism industry, is that there are events which are beyond our control, which is a natural disaster or pandemic like this. One of the first industries to get badly affected is the tourism industry. So going forward, we believe that we should have some kind of a business resilience insurance scheme for tourism businesses, as well as some income protection insurance scheme for the stakeholders. So these are two areas that we should look at. And in fact, we have proposed to Sri Lankan tourism also to allocate some of the TDL taxes that we are paying, a portion of it for a disaster recovery scheme, where we could have access in an event like this in the future.
Thank you. You have been a great champion for the industry, Sanath.
Thank you.
Dr. Hanif?
Yes, my message is we don't need health or wealth, we need health and wealth. So I think our government and our government and health authorities are doing a splendid job. But let me remind them, I think like Vish did, to listen to the data, to look at the data, to take the science into consideration and make objective decisions. I know the decision-making process is very difficult, but on behalf of the people, they need to act on the science and the data produced by our health system. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Malik, thank you very much for staying on. Can we have the last word from you?
No, I think, yeah, we have discussed the topic thoroughly. I must say, thank you for bringing together this diverse group of people. I think it is quite obvious that in a situation like this, it is not just a matter of health, it's not just a matter of the economy. And I think the discussion we had today is exactly what is needed. We look forward to better times ahead. I'm sure it will come. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Arun. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all very much. I have not much to say except those two words, thank you. Now, for and on behalf of the number of people who may be still with us and on Facebook, if you came in late on this session, on this webinar, we just like to let you know that it will remain in the Facebook pages of Daily FT, ICCSL, as well as the MBA Alumni Association pages. They will remain. So it can be reviewed and looked at over again in the time ahead. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, it is hoped that there will be a subsidiary video that will be made, and Dinesh Virakodi is kind of making the arrangement where two more medical personnel, one from Australia and the other one from Maryland, Dr. Yunus, will be also in a conversation, helping us to appreciate how they, from the overseas point of view, will be able to assess the progress or the regress or whatever it is with regard to the global pandemic. So that's for later. But for now, this particular webinar conducted today under the aegis of ICCSL with the support of the Rotary Club of Colombo, the Daily FT, as well as, let me get it right, the Daily FT, as well as the Alumni Association, the MBA Alumni Association of the University of Colombo. So all of those are to be thanked. So at the end, we had some very interesting remarks, and I don't need to reiterate too much. I think at the end, the short responses that we had kind of summarized everything. But it was interesting to have heard that lockdown is not a popular term with anyone who was on the webinar. That's not the word or the phrase. The phrase now, movement control order, as Vish suggested. Well, that's a tad more, shall we say, user-friendly. So there we are. It has to be data-driven. So it's not a casual approach. It has to be data-driven. And as Dr. Gotabe helped us to appreciate, balance is vital. And this smart lockdown, or the MCO, really needs to be looked at very, very positively. And we have heard it repeatedly said, there is no room for anti-vaxxer sentiment. It is out there, but there is no room for that, not in our country. We have heard that repeated by Dr., or should I say, Professor Malik over and over again. So the idea is to get the vaccination. And we've been able to appreciate from Mr. Vijay Wardana's point of view that, you know, gone are the days when humans can be considered a commodity. No, it's a priority to save lives, but at the same time, there has to be the maintenance of businesses. How do we do it? Well, many ideas came up, and also the idea is to lower incidence. So that image that we had cast in our minds by Professor Malik of that massive container carrier, massive vessel on the ocean, you can't turn the corner, you can't stop it just because you want it to. It goes on for a little while. So early interventions are vital. And obviously things are being done. And there has to be a limiting of a full-scale infection of the wider community. It was interesting to hear from him also that herd immunity might not be a realistic expectation. We like to keep that in mind. We have also heard that telco can identify hotspots. There is a lot that can be done. However, people need to get on board. People need to get on board and cooperate, which was also mentioned by the Honorable Minister Rajapaksa when he said that the government is cognizant of the challenge, but there has to be a collective response and an approach which is also collective. So everyone needs to get on board. And we've heard many ideas about the need to mitigate that which is currently going on, to prevent it rather from being a major threat, and timing and the duration of the so-called lockdown or the MCO will bear results, but it has to be done, and again, data-driven. So those were the clear ideas that we were able to appreciate. With regard to the tourism sector, they have been delivered a near death blow, but not quite. The idea is that it is possible to enter into the green space, as it were, and the quicker that is done, the better. And with regard to the impact, well, restructuring of debt was spoken of by Mr. Ukwata, and the tourism hotels have been hard hit, but the start must be there as quickly as possible. They cannot wait till 2023, but they have to start tourism travel, but control, again, control, therefore data-driven. So there's a lot there. And we thank you once again. And we'd like to say thank you very much to the sponsors whose messages will now be seen and heard on FB or Facebook formats. So saying bye for now and thank you.
The International Chamber of Commerce Sri Lanka is the national office of the Paris-based business organization. The ICC comprises of membership of 45 million members in 130 countries. Trade facilitation, export and import and cross-border trade and issues relating to freight forwarding and many other matters of importance are addressed by the ICC. ICC Sri Lanka works through several committees to debate, discuss and suggest solutions on subjects related to the mandate of the Chamber. Each of these commissions are led by professionals in the committee, with many committees functioning. ICC includes a membership committee, International Relations Committee, Policy and Advocacy Committee, Training and Development Committee, Banking Committee. ICC is the sole authorized guaranteeing agency for ATIACAN. It's an internationally accepted customs document which enables duty-free and tax-free temporary importation of items as commercial samples. The ATIACAN reduces costs and red tape. The ICC is also known for its popular publications invaluable for bankers, lawyers, arbitrators and anyone involved in cross-border trade. Its members are provided with a member's privilege card which includes discounts with multiple retailers. ICC Sri Lanka's vision is to be the organization of choice to advance international trade and investment for businesses in Sri Lanka. ICC Sri Lanka's mission is to be the change agent in national policy formulation and implementation and facilitator of global businesses with Sri Lanka and disseminator of information on the development of business utilizing the services of ICC Paris while continuing to be a facilitator of dispute resolution. In addition, the ICC Sri Lanka organizes seminars, lectures, meetings with business leaders, and gives recognition to Sri Lankan businesses for outstanding achievements. ICC can play a special role in connecting business to the world and be a driving force for all Sri Lankan businesses.
If you seek for business, look for insightful. If you seek for politics, look for anticipation. If you value lifestyle, look for the extraordinary. If you love sports, look for the passion. Daily FT. Be empowered.